Next up we have marijuana. The origins of this word are Mexican Spanish. Now originally, the word was used as a name for other plants by the Mexicans, like a general kind of thing. But on their influx into America between 1910 and 1920 after the Mexican Revolution, they introduced the use of cannabis as a recreational drug. Until then, cannabis had been predominantly used for medicinal purposes in the States. Now, in what is seen as a blatantly racist move, and with this new use of cannabis meeting with predominant disapproval, the drug was given the name marijuana in order for it to have a greater association with the Mexicans, further enhancing its negative image. Mad.
In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed. Cannabis sales were now taxed. Part of the reason this act was passed was because of all the fear-mongering going on at the time. And a huge instigator of that fear-mongering was the man behind the Marijuana Tax Act, Harry Anslinger. Anslinger was named the Commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics during the Prohibition era. But once national prohibition ended in 1933, Anslinger turned his focus to marijuana. This is when racism and xenophobia really kicked in. Harry Anslinger took the scientifically unsupported idea of marijuana as a violence-inducing drug, connected it to Black and Hispanic people, and created a perfect package of terror to sell to the American media and public. By emphasizing the Spanish word marijuana instead of cannabis, he created a strong association between the drug and the newly arrived Mexican immigrants who helped popularize it in the States. He also created a narrative around the idea that cannabis made Black people forget their place in society.
There once was a time when the federal government did have the will.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
In 1970, President Nixon signed the Controlled Substances Act. The act divided a list of drugs into 5 categories, or schedules, based on their potential for abuse and medicinal value. Drugs in Schedule 1 were made illegal for all purposes.
Category 1 is the most dangerous drugs, and that's where marijuana is, like right next to heroin.
To justify this decision, President Nixon hired a group of doctors and legal experts known as the Schaefer Commission to study the dangers of marijuana. But when they found that marijuana was not as detrimental to health as assumed, Nixon ignored their report. Instead, he placed marijuana at the forefront of a war on drugs that would last decades.
The enforcement of these laws have absolutely disproportionately impacted communities of color and continue to do so to this day.
The federal government was uncompromising when it came to marijuana criminalization.
Illinois became the 11th state to legalize recreational cannabis. Good news for home.
A little bit closer to home now, the Pritzker administration releasing $31.4 million in grants to community groups across Illinois following a successful first year of marijuana sales. This was possible through the Restore, Reinvest, and Renew program included in the law legalizing adult-use cannabis last year. 25% of marijuana tax revenue went toward the grants to help communities with a long history of disinvestment, violence, and disproportionate impacts from the war on drugs and mass incarceration. Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton says it was critical to have citizens with lived experience on the board responsible for the grants.
And it was important to go into communities and make sure that they knew what this process was about and to make sure that their voices were a part of making sure that this is the most equity-centric, not just legislation, but R3 program that could have ever existed.
The state's Criminal Justice Information Authority received nearly 400 applications for the funds.
2021, Illinois used a points-based evaluation for its recreational cannabis licenses. It allocated a limited number of licenses per region. Chicago had 47. The first step to securing a license was getting into the lottery. The number of points earned on an application determined eligibility. Categories had defined values. Social equity was worth 50 points, knowledge and experience, 30. And there were 5 points for U.S. veteran status. The maximum number of points you could earn was 250. And it turns out those veterans' points carried more weight than many realized.
And that was part of the legislative negotiated process. We had people who would not vote for this unless we added a veteran's point. We really didn't think that that was going to be the one that flipped it. There was no way to know what was going to happen as a result of that.
The result was the state awarded the 21 groups with perfect scores the 75 licenses available.
Because no one realized that you had to be perfect to run a weed shop.
How many points did you get on your application?
I received a 243 on my family application and a 245 on another.
Because now here it is, I'm leaving Iraq, the war, you know what I mean? And then I'm coming home to Chirac. My chances of survival in that war were greater than it is in making it out of these neighborhoods, bro. And this is what the war on drugs created, these conditions.
What's it like living through that trauma?
I mean, shit. There's a reason for them sleepless nights, you know what I mean? But you got kids of your own, you gotta fight through that shit, you know what I mean?
Chavis is hoping access to the cannabis industry will help rebuild his old neighborhood. He applied for a license to own a cannabis dispensary last year, when Illinois legalized it with a social equity plan attached, which would give folks from communities targeted by the war on drugs a better shot of actually benefiting from the new industry. Right now, there are 0 majority Black-owned dispensaries in Illinois.
You're talking about $1 million industry, and you're talking about an industry that was built and pioneered on our backs. Like, I played a part in that. Like, you know what I mean? I sold cannabis. We're sitting in jail right now because of it. We're in the graveyard right now because of it. We made this industry. This isn't something new.
The state got way more applications than expected. So regulators decided the only applications that would be considered for a license would be those with perfect scores. And that's when things got complicated. So what was your score?
Oh, my score was a 249.
Is 249 good?
Yeah, the perfect score was 250.
Ah, so you're 1 point off.
Yeah, 1 point shy.
Only 21 applicants were left standing. They'd vie for 75 dispensary licenses through a lottery system, meaning multiple pot shops for guys like this, and none for guys like Jermel, who lost a point for his hypothetical floor plan, or the other near-perfect applicants. Former State Senator Ricky Hendon is a mainstay of West Chicago life and applied for a dispensary license. He was left out of the lottery and left wondering about the loopholes in the equity program.
They have a clause that says if you promise to hire 6 minorities, you qualify as a social equity applicant.
That's all you need. You have to promise to hire 6 people who are Black, who are...
Or Latino, you qualify as a social equity applicant.
Just hire them.
Just hire them.
And so these are all social equity applicants?
Supposedly.
Is there a danger that social equity programs are over-promising? The process itself is so onerous. Going against big money is such a tough thing.
If Governor J.B. Pritzker gets this wrong, he will not be reelected.